Welcome back, everybody, to more from the Sableyes, and today we've got something a bit different, something new. An idea that we've got from one of our comments is a little series that we're going to call How to Beat, and that is where we're going to look at how to beat specific matchups. And since Reshiram Charizard is seeming like it's going to be one of the best decks in the upcoming Unbroken Bonds format, we thought we'd look at him first. And to do that with me is Jordan. How's it going, Jordan?
Very well, Mitch.
That's good. Before we get started, if you like the videos, then please like, comment, subscribe, etc. But let's get to it. So, before we start looking at specific matchups and how we're going to win with those decks against ReshiZard, we thought we'd very quickly just look at the types of matchups that we have. These are still very much up in the air because we don't know, but we've got a few good ones, a few even ones, and a few bad ones. Now, good matchups. Pikachu Zekrom seems like a pretty good matchup. You're taking 3 prizes pretty much every opportunity you get, whereas they're going to struggle to. Celebi Venusaur and Buzzwole Pheromosa, obviously, if you see that, you're pretty happy, because you're going to be taking big knockouts for pretty much for free with Volcanion. And in theory, and we don't know because we haven't tested it, because who would test Stall, but in theory, Stall has a relatively good, you have a relatively good matchup against Stall as ReshiZard.
Yeah, I'm noticing a bit of a trend with the decks that this deck has good matchups against. They all seem to be big GX or tag team GX decks where Reshiram is just kind of built to one-hit all of the big Pokemon in the format. So you see Pikachu Zekrom is going to struggle to kill Reshiram, whereas Reshiram will be able to knock Pikachu out much easier. And of course, the other decks have Fire Weakness, so that's going to be bad for them. Stall can potentially also have Fire Weakness, considering Metal is becoming more and more popular in Stall variants, and even if it's not though, this deck's got so many ways to get energy back and just attack with consistent damage using Volcanion. I don't think Stall really has that many answers for this deck as of right now.
Yeah, so they seem to be ReshiZard's pretty good matchups. It's even against a couple of pretty important ones. Obviously, it's even against itself in the mirror, but we can talk about that in a minute. It's also even, in our experience, against Zoroark Dewgong and Zapdos Jirachi. Both of these decks obviously struggle to get one-shots on ReshiZard, but even though you're taking one-shots on them, you're missing out on the prize trade at some point. So it's kind of a little bit touch and go. It depends on which decks play.
Yeah, all of these decks have different ways of kind of manipulating the prize trade to be in their favor. The fact that Reshiram Charizard gives away 3 prizes is probably the only bad thing about the card, so there's got to be some decks out there that exploit that weakness, and of course, the mirror match is always going to be even, although there are quite a few different builds of Reshiram Charizard, which we'll talk about very shortly, and depending on which build you're playing, you can play some different tech cards to try and swing that matchup into your favor.
Yeah, 100%. Now, there are obviously bad matchups, as there are with any deck, and all of these have something in common, and that is the fact that their main attacker in this particular matchup is going to be a non-GX. So, Quagsire Ganondorf seems pretty bad. Baby Blacephalon has a high damage cap and is a non-GX attacker. And Ultra Malamar, even though it plays GX cards, has that pesky Giratina, which half hits for a reasonable attack cost. So, they seem like they're pretty tough matchups.
Yeah, and most importantly, in my opinion, is the fact that all of these decks specifically have non-EX attackers that are good against Reshiram Charizard, but more importantly, the fact is that they cannot be one-hit KO'd by Volcanion's attack, doing only 110 damage. These Pokemon all have 120 or 130 HP, and that is the perfect number, I think, for having a really good price trade against a Reshiram Charizard deck.
Yeah, so there's some good ones and some bad ones, but that's the same as with any deck. Let's look at the ways that we can try and swing this matchup when we're playing against ReshiZard. And we'll start off as if we're playing the deck itself. We're playing Reshiram Charizard. We sit down across from someone who's also playing the deck. What cards can we use to swing that matchup? Now, first of all, we can use that little Volcanion up in the right-hand corner. Feverish Explosion does 110 if you've got 4 energy down, which is not hard to do. And with a Choice Band, you're half-hitting a Reshiram Charizard. You'd probably be using this attack pretty frequently in the early game if you're looking to try and swing the prize trade in your favour.
Well, yeah, literally, as I just said, all of the decks that beat Reshiram Charizard are non-EX attackers that can't be knocked out by Volcanion, and Volcanion happens to be a non-EX attacker that can't be knocked out by Volcanion. So
it's quite good, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like a pretty decent attacker in the mirror. Obviously, you can kind of just trade Volcanion against Volcanion, and then that's kind of inefficient for both players because neither player is taking very relevant prizes. But you definitely don't want to be the first player to lose a Reshiram Charizard.
No, not at all. Now, obviously, if we're looking to attack with Volcanion, we probably want to find a way to manipulate our damage output so that it's one, easier for us to half hit, and two, maybe we can swing the trade by knocking out a Volcanion when our opponent isn't expecting us to. We can do that in a few ways. We've got a couple of tech ideas down here. First one, Professor Kukui. Very, very handy. First of all, you can use it on Reshiram Charizard to do 280 with a Choice Band, which obviously knocks out another ReshiZard when maybe they weren't expecting you to. It also means that Volcanion can KO another Volcanion, which it needs to do to swing the prize trade around a little bit, give itself a bit of momentum. Or it could even be used to guarantee a half hit on a ReshiZard, like your Kukui, Choice Band, and then Feverish Explosion for 160, which means another Volcanion's going to be able to knock out that ReshiZard a little bit easier.
Yeah, it's funny that both of the attackers in this deck are like 10 damage away from knocking themselves out, so having a card that increases your damage by 10 or 20 is a pretty good card to swing a mirror match when your stats are like that.
100%. Another card we can use if we are playing the Salazzle version of this deck is the, I think it's Guardian's Rising Hot Poison Salazzle, which we can play down to burn and poison your opponent's active Pokemon. That's an extra 30, and it means that suddenly ReshiZard is finding it a lot easier to knock itself out, and that Volcanion can get those numbers a little bit easier too.
Yeah, I would argue this is a better version of Professor Kukui because obviously it doesn't take up your supporter for the turn. You can still play this as well as Welder or Guzma, but it also adds plus 30 instead of plus 20. It's just a better number.
It is, 100%.
Obviously, the downside is that you need to obviously be playing a Salazzle line, so you have to be running that specific build of Charizard. Not a bad thing, just limits your options, and of course it also means you need to have a Spare Lander on the bench ready to go. But other than that, it's definitely a card that's going to swing a mirror match if you get it at the right time.
100%. Another card that we can use to manipulate damage. We're talking about damage here, Mitch. Come on, man. On the right-hand side of the screen, we have Shrine of Punishment. This one's been seeing a bit of play in some Japanese lists, and it means that Flare Strike with a Choice Band is a knockout on your opponent's ReshiZard. Now, the bad thing is that your opponent obviously gets the benefit from this as well, but if you're taking the first knockout on a ReshiZard, maybe you don't care that that's happening. Maybe you're just happy to take those 3 prizes first.
Yeah, if you put the Shrine down during your turn, obviously you get the benefit of being able to take use of it first, effectively. And if you time it correctly, you can probably knock out their only good attacker with Angie on board, and then all of a sudden you have 10 damage on you, but they don't have an attacker to follow up with.
And here's the thing, if they've got a ReshiZard on the bench, even if it's clean, they still can only really do 230, 40, 50 damage with Shrine. So they're not going to be able to knock you out. So that's probably not a bad way of getting yourself in front in the prize trade. On the other side, if you're not looking to increase your damage, maybe you're looking to throw off your opponent's numbers a little bit, we can just use Max Potion to heal off our ReshiZard. That might not be the worst thing in the world, especially if, we've got access to welders or things like that we can get our energy back on. Max Potion seems fairly decent.
Yeah, obviously Max Potion is a pretty strong card when you're able to recharge up the Pokemon that you discard all of the energy off of, and then just keep attacking with it. It's like you didn't discard the energy at all. This works in 2 ways, either with 1 energy attackers or with decks that can accelerate multiple energy a turn. And this deck effectively has both of those things if you look at Reshiram and Volcanion.
100%. It means obviously you don't get to outrage, but you'd rather not outrage and not lose the 3 prizes, give yourself an opportunity to get in front and set yourself up again. Obviously, these cards aren't guaranteed to win you the game. You're still playing a mirror match, so if anything, they just increase the chance of you getting up on top. If you're playing them and your opponent isn't, then you've at least given yourself an advantage that they don't have. So yeah, we'll move on to the next deck now, Reshiram Charizard. If we sit down with this deck, Zoroark Dewgong, across from a ReshiZard, we're going to feel reasonably comfortable, especially because Dewgong is such a good attacker in this matchup.
Yeah, it really is. And the fact that it does weakness to Charizard, while it's very useful, it almost doesn't matter at all. I feel like just doing the 60 damage to two different Charizards, or just two different Tag Team GXs in general, is all you really need to do to set yourself up to win the prize trade. So if you hit weakness on the active one, that's a bonus, but just aiming to get that turn 2 Dual Blizzard onto two GXs, or maybe even knocking out their active Volcanion and setting up their Reshiram that they just powered up to be knocked out, is pretty much all the Dewgong needs to do in this deck.
Yeah, 100%, and it's got some pretty good partners that we can include. Obviously, Zoroark is a really good card. It's not great in this matchup because it's the type of card that Reshiram Charizard really beats up on, but it is a reliable half-hitting option, and in conjunction with Dual Blizzard, you can pretty easily take a knockout on a ReshiZard. I mean, if you Dual Blizzard an active ReshiZard with a Choice Band, that's 180. That's very, very easy for Zoroark to do. But if you are struggling to do that, we've got a number of techs on the screen. The first one isn't really a tech. We've put it down because it's an important one to discuss, and that's Persian GX. And the reason that it's here and not up next to the two cards is because, one, the deck's called Zoroark Dewgong at the moment, but more importantly, this is going to be your key to winning that matchup. The first ReshiZard that you knock out is probably going to be in a combination of Zoroark and Dewgong in some way, shape or form. But the fact that Persian can do 190 plus 30 with a Choice Band means that that sneaky 60 damage that you put on in turn 2, Jordan, is going to be very, very relevant.
It is. In fact, that I would argue that's the perfect amount of damage to do to take out the very crucial Reshiram for game.
100%.
And there's another way you can do that if you are playing the tech Slowking. Depending on whether you play Slowpoke or not, it doesn't really matter because you can evolve it off of Ditto, but Slowking gives you the option to one-hit KO a Reshiram Charizard if you, for example, miss the 60 damage snipe on one of the Reshirams, or if they're able to heal it off some way. You can potentially play the tech Slowking to take a one-hit KO, assuming Persian just can't quite get the numbers up.
Yeah, the important thing to remember with Slowking is that it does require the energy to be on the Charizard, so it needs to have 4 on it in order for the Psychic to take the knockout. But it's still a really, really good, easily splashable card. You're playing the triple colorless anyway, you're probably playing the Ditto anyway, it only costs you 1 slot, and it probably shores up that matchup really well for you. So definitely worth considering.
And even if they only have 3 energy on the active, you can also knock them out using a Choice Band as well.
This is true, this is true. Another couple of cards that maybe people don't think of as cards that are going to swing the ReshiZard matchup, but at least give you a better opportunity. First, Resetting Whole Marshadow. It's a card that people aren't really talking about a huge amount, but is an exceptionally good card, especially in Zoroark. Resetting Whole can be put down on the bench in your first turn, and at any point during the game, you can just remove a stadium from play, and that includes Prism Star Stadium. So Heat Factory is only ever really going to be down for 1 turn, and that's going to slow down ReshiZard quite a lot.
Yeah, I would say the fact that ReshiZard can use Green's Exploration to search out for Heat Factory turn 1, that kind of sets them up for the rest of the game, because not a lot of decks will be able to discard their stadium on the first turn. If they get 2, maybe 3 uses out of their card, they're just going to have such a massive hand. But Zoroark now has the option to, just like Reshiram can search out for the Heat Factory, we can now search out for the card that removes it.
100%. And even if it doesn't work, and maybe Zoroark falls behind on hand size, ReshiZard gets a big hand, Zoroark plays Judge. And Judge, though it's a card that you're not specifically teching in for ReshiZard, is a card that, in specific circumstances, can completely cripple ReshiZard's board state.
Yeah, I know in my personal testing, Hand Disruption has been one of the most common ways to kind of defeat this deck when it's on a winning streak, because you can judge them on the same turn that you take out one of their attackers, and then the chances of them getting a return KO is so low that you kind of just steamroll from there if they miss.
100%. Now, you've got lots of other little tech cards that you can use, like Zoroark's one of those decks where you can be tricky and play like Mewtwo and Giovanni and all these other cards to give yourself access to certain things over and over and over, but essentially, as long as you are removing their stadium, you're disrupting their hand when you can, and that you're getting those half hits consistently on those ReshiZards, you should be in a relatively good position.
There is actually one more card that I want to quickly go over, which we haven't got in the graphic here, but If you have a look at Dewgong's basic form Seal, it's actually got an attack for double colorless that does 30 damage. And if you get this in the early game, say you open with a Seal, and you get a choice band, you can actually do 120 damage for just double colorless with a non-EX, which is something that's really strong in this matchup to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, 100%. So like they're stuck in the active with a Charizard, you just DCE, choice band, and half hit, and that seems fine. And if they can't respond, which would be surprising, but maybe it happens, if they can't respond, then evolve to a Dewgong, take a knockout, and move on with your life. It seems like a pretty solid way to start the day.
Seems good indeed.
But hey, the way they're probably going to go about this matchup, if you can get the Dewgong attack off for at least 120 and 60, then you are setting yourself up to win the game, because that just means you are 2 attacks away, and with Catwalk on Persian, you're not really fussed if they do take a big GX knockout. But it's easier said than done. It's just what you'd be trying to do to beat ReshiZard. Moving on to our third deck, we are looking at Zapdos Jirachi. Zapdos Jirachi, you would think, would be a reasonably good deck to try and mitigate some of the advantages that ReshiZard has, but unfortunately Zapdos only has 110 HP, so it does get one shot by Volcanion, unfortunately.
I think if it wasn't for that fact, then this deck would be one of those decks that just runs over Reshiram Charizard in the prize trade, but the fact that Reshiram Charizard can just chain Volcanions pretty much just as easily as Zapdos can chain Zapdoses, and you can just go for one with them and then clean up in the late game with a Reshiram that they potentially can't deal with.
Yeah, 100%. So we need to find a way to deal with it. Tapu Koko GX is the first card we've got here. It's probably the most obvious card to include. It's been included in Zapdos decks since Zapdos became a deck. Tapu Koko's GX attack, Tapu Thunder, is the way that we're going to try and deal with Charizard. 50 damage times the amount of energy attached to your opponent's Pokemon. It's important that the energy is 5 or more, so that you can get the easiest knockout. Obviously, Electro Power and Choice Band are available, but if there's a Charizard with 4 energy and another one floating around, you'd be pretty happy that you're going to be able to take that knockout that turn.
And the good thing is that Volcanion's attack actually requires 4 energy to be on board for it to be able to do 210 damage. So you can pretty much guarantee your opponent's going to have at least 4 energy on board at all times. And 4 energy is enough to say that it's pretty doable to take a knockout in Reshiram. Obviously 5 is the ideal number, but you can work around 4.
Yeah, 100%. So you're going to try and take a knockout as quickly as you can with Zapdos and some other kind of attackers that you have floating around the place, and then try and take your last knockout with Tapu Koko GX. Or maybe even do it the other way around, like, it's up to you. But as long as you take one knockout with Tapu Koko GX, you've given yourself a chance to win the game. We also have the idea of the Zapdos Beasts deck, which, you know, can play Tapu Koko as well, but Buzzwole or Nihilego on the screen are both very decent tech options to attack into a Reshiram Charizard if you go up against them.
Yeah, obviously these cards are only available to the Zapdos Beast version of this deck, but the one thing that makes Buzzwole especially good in this matchup is the fact that it one-hit KOs Volcanion easily, something Zapdos struggles a little bit to do, and doesn't get return hit KO'd by Volcanion either. And that's a pretty big deal because there's a good chance that you could maybe stay on the 4 prize turn for more than one turn.
Yeah, 100%. Doing 120 damage against a Pokemon that has 120 HP, you can take out 2 of them, then you've done your job. That's a pretty solid Buzzwole, and I'd be happy to use it. It means you're looking for maybe 2 more attacks to win yourself the game. And Nihilego is a pretty good option as well. When your opponent has 2 prize cards remaining, you get to choose one of their attacks. Now, that doesn't necessarily seem like it's that great. I mean, you're only doing 230, you need to do 270, but Choice Band and Beast Energy mean that Nihilego can get the one-hit knockout on ReshiZard if it needs it.
Yeah, you can have either Choice Band or Beast Energy along with a Shrine Tick as well, which is another way to get the knockout. So there's definitely ways to do it. It's almost like the mirror match we were just discussing not too long ago. You just need that tiny bit of extra damage, and all of a sudden Reshiram's attack is able to knock itself out, and Nihilego can take full advantage of that.
100%. It's actually quite interesting because Zapdos, even though it feels like it falls behind early, you can potentially take 2 huge knockouts on the last 2 turns of the game if you're playing both Nihilego and Tapu Koko GX. Obviously, things need to fall in the right place, but Reshiram Charizard can get a 4-prize lead, and you can just go Nihilego, knockout, no worries. Knock out that Nihilego, Tapu Koko GX, Tapu Thunder GX, knockout. Like, you can potentially swing the matchup from 6-1 or 6-2 to winning with 1 prize remaining very, very quickly, which is pretty cool. It's the only deck that I think that can really do that.
Obviously, the hardest part of this matchup for Zapdos is dealing with those Volcanions. Zap just isn't built to do 120 damage consistently against non-GXs. But when it comes to finding ways to do a Reshiram Charizard, it has multiple options to kind of come back from behind.
100%. And it can also do the thing that Zoroark Dewgong manages to do, and that's Hand Disruption. Marshadow with Let Loose is a really, really good option. You're not super worried about it because you've got Jirachis down, you can Stellar Wish out. But if they haven't set up a Heat Factory, or if they haven't set up a Salazzle, then sometimes that can just be enough to stall them a couple of turns so that you can start to regain the advantage. So Hand Disruption, really big deal.
Yeah, obviously there's only those 1 or 2 crucial turns that you need to catch up in this matchup, and Marshall's just going to make it that little bit easier to pull those turns off.
100%. Now, this next matchup is a little bit tougher. We're talking Pikachu Zekrom now. This is probably one that if you see Reshiram Charizard across from you, you're going to be a little bit concerned. Obviously, Tapu Koko GX is still an option for Pikachu Zekrom. It means that you can Tapu Thunder for a knockout. It's just that you're probably not as likely to have the amount of energy on the field as you would like, because Volcanion's not going to be as big of an attacker, although it's still going to do the same thing in its matchup against Pikachu Zekrom as it would against Reshiram Charizard. But you're gonna find this a little bit tougher. Tapu Koko GX and Zapdos are both reasonable options because they do the things that you need to do, but without the extra text, it's going to be a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, it's really hard finding your prizes with this deck because it's pretty easy to take out one Reshiram Charizard GX using either Pikachu Zekrom's GX attack or using Koko's GX attack, but you only get one GX attack, and once you've used that GX attack, your damage just doesn't seem strong enough to be able to hit 270. And when your opponent's 1-hit KOing you and you're having to 2-hit KO them, that's when you start to lose the prize trade. And that's where the Zapdos, to maybe get a half hit on one of the Reshiram Charizards and then clean up with a GX later on, is probably going to be your best bet to try and swing the prize trade back into your favor.
Yeah, one of the other things that we thought of that you could use, if you were trying to swing that matchup around a little bit for Pikachu Zekrom, you could play Lysander Labs to turn off Pokemon Tool cards in play. That means that it's going to be slightly harder for ReshiZard to find that 240 number than it needs to take a knockout in one shot on Pikachu Zekrom. If they're playing like Shrine of Punishment, it's not the end, like it's not going to make any difference. But if they're not and they're only playing Choice Band, it means that Pikachu Zekrom can at least survive a turn, which might be enough to give itself an opportunity to get out of there.
Yeah, the reason this matchup is hard is obviously because it's hard to 1-hit KO a Reshiram Charizard in one hit. So if you can force them to 2-hit KO you, then all of a sudden you're back to an even game. It is a lot to ask for because you do need to kind of hope they miss an extra resource, but that's just an extra resource you're trying to force them to find every turn. Definitely could be the swing card in that matchup.
Yeah, very easily. But it's one of those ones where the matchup is pretty rough to start with. You're probably going to find it tough to come back, but maybe these cards give you the edge that you might need. Your best bet is going to be to try a Tag Bolt GX with 6 energy for a knockout on one and then a half hit on another. Maybe you've set it up with Zapdos earlier in the game and you're just trying to find a Pikachu Zekrom to Tag Bolt for 6 energy, but it's a hard ask, especially when Reshiram Charizard can just clear off the other board in one turn.
It is a hard ask, but with the new support that Pikachu Zekrom got, it's a much faster deck now. You can potentially just power it up before Reshiram Charizard gets the chance to respond, and then that's your opportunity to win the game.
Yeah, so it's always there. These cards probably give you the best options to win. Moving on to some decks now that you've probably chosen specifically because you wanted to beat Reshiram Charizard. This one here, Baby Blacephalon, we think has a reasonably good matchup, and it's for the reasons that you can see on the screen. There's 3 cards here that we think Baby Blacephalon uses to overcome the problems that other decks might have. First of all, Blacephalon, as we've spoken about before, is a basic Pokemon. It's a non-GX attacker that can one-shot a Volcanion whilst not being one-shot back. That's a big deal. And the best thing about Blacephalon is that not only can it knock out a Volcanion, it can actually knock out a ReshiZard as well if everything goes right.
Yeah, it seems like this deck obviously has the advantage against Charizard and Volcanion if you're able to pull off your combos consistently, and the cards you see on the screen are the more important cards to making sure your damage output is going to be at maximum level for most of the game. Pretty much the only way I would say you're losing this matchup is if you're forced to discard too many energy, you just don't have enough energy in your deck to finish off the game. And that's why running not only Fire Crystal, but Energy Retrieval as well gives you that little bit of extra damage output that you need to not run out of resources.
Yeah, if you're playing like 4 Fire Crystal and a couple of Energy Retrieval, it just gives you that extra out to get those energies that you've burnt back. Wishful Baton, also a card that is going to mean that even if you do manage to get knocked out by one of your opponent's Pokemon, those energy just go straight onto another Blacephalon, Energy Retrieval them back, and you're attacking again. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And the other card that we think probably gives this deck a bit of a boost to get over the top, Beast Ring. When Blacephalons get knocked out, like, you've worked so hard as the ReshiZard player to knock out 2 Blacephalon, and then they just power up 2 more Blacephalon with 2 Beast Ring. Like, it's almost, I'd almost go as far as to say that Baby Blacephalon just auto wins this matchup because of the cards that it plays. Like, it seems too strong.
Yeah, and obviously there's no way for Reshiram to skip the Beast Ring turn. Like, that's going to happen at some point. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, it's not like Zoroark where you can deal with the Beast Ring turn for maybe 1 turn and then take 3 prizes or whatever. Like, it's gonna happen. You're gonna have to deal with it, and Baby Blacephalon is just gonna walk all over you. So, unfortunately, if you're the ReshiZard player, not a lot of positives for this one. But Baby Blacephalon, definitely a way to beat ReshiZard, and this way is the one that we've seen the most hype for, and that is Quagsire and Ganondorf. This deck is specifically built to beat ReshiZard. If you're going to a tournament and you want to beat ReshiZard, you're watching this video to try and find out how to beat ReshiZard, just play Quagsire and Ganondorf. It's going to beat ReshiZard.
Yeah, that's the simple one-sentence answer to solve this video, is just play this deck, because you can't really lose, honestly. I just don't see how Charizard Reshiram can deal with this deck unless you've heavily teched for it. I mean, obviously there are cards like Weakness Policy you can play to potentially make it harder for Quagsire to get knockouts, and you can probably think of some other techs that could swing the matchup in your favor a little bit, but you're still dealing with, even without weakness, you're still dealing with these non-GX Pokemon that have more than 110 HP. These are already a problem, and these ones are just the worst of the bunch.
Yeah, they would have been a problem if they didn't have a blue background, let alone just one-shotting in return. The only way that I think the only way a ReshiZard player is going to go about trying to win this game is trying to Guzma Quagsire, or trying to Guzma Wooper before they become Quagsire. So a really, really good card that you can use to stop that from happening is Articuno. 2 Water Energy does 70 damage. That one-shots a Volcanion. It also, with a Choice Band, does 200 damage to a ReshiZard, which is nothing to sneeze at, and it means that the ReshiZard player isn't going to be able to take out the Woopers. So the only way that I can see winning is beaten by a single card. I mean, Articuno has 110 HP, so Volcanion can knock it out, but it's going to be rough. And also, if you're playing with the new Kyurem from Unbroken Bonds, Hail Prism takes a knockout on a ReshiZard, and even if it didn't, the card, like, it says that it'd be paralyzed, right? So, like, you can do 220, maybe you miss the Choice Band, you do 220, you don't knock it out, and then ReshiZard's paralyzed, and what are you going to do? Like, you're going to Guzma around, like, you got to play one of your Switch to try and get out. It seems really bad.
Yeah, there's not really much that Reshiram can do about Kyurem. Just the fact that it knocks out all of your Pokemon and has 130 HP, by default makes it already super tough to deal with. Obviously, there are cards like Kukui or that Hot Poison Salazzle that you can use to take a knockout on a Kyurem, but cool, you've taken 1 prize. 5 to go.
Yep, no worries. I don't know how you're going to take the rest. So, if you were coming to this video looking to find out a way to beat ReshiZard, this is probably the way to do it. Like, all the other decks that I can see a way that ReshiZard could potentially win, but yeah, this is just not happening. So, as a wrap-up, ReshiZard is very beatable. It is not unbeatable by any stretch of the imagination. It's going to be tough to beat, because it's exceptionally quick, and it can hit very hard, but if you're playing the right decks, or you're playing the right deck, if things go your way, you can give yourself a pretty solid chance.
Yeah, I think that you could almost classify this card as being close to unfair, but it's not, because there are specific decks you can play that you just completely destroy this deck. There are decks you can play in almost all of the top decks to give yourself a chance. Like, it's a deck that doesn't really have an auto win in the sense that almost any deck has a chance to beat it, but any deck that hasn't heavily prepared for it is kind of just going to get overrun by its speed and power.
100%. So, hey, I hope you've enjoyed. I hope we've given you some ideas, some stuff to think about. Firstly, if you want to beat it, don't play something that's grass. Don't play something that is a big GX attacker that's going to be tough. Play something with more than 110 HP that does 120 or more. Do that. That seems like a pretty solid way to win this matchup. Thanks, Jordan, for coming along.
Anytime.
And thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content, then please click the little sable eye in the middle of the screen to subscribe. On the left, you'll see a video that YouTube thinks you'll like, and on the right, you'll see our Unbroken Bonds playlist for more content on Reshiram Charizard. Thanks for coming along, and we'll see you next time for more from the Sable Eyes. Bye.